Hello. In this video, we're going to discuss Unit 1, Lesson 2, Theory of Evolution by Natural Selection. If you're watching this video, you should have your textbook in front of you, the Diversity of Living Things. You need to open up your textbook to page 15, because on 15, we're going to discuss the vocabulary words and what to do with those. So I'll wait for you. Open your book to page 15 and have a pencil with you. Do that now. Pause the video and I'll be right back. Okay, so you should have your book open to page 15. You should see this page. What you're going to do is you're going to learn a little bit about natural selection. Natural selection is nature's way of choosing which genes get passed on. On page 15, you have 4 true-false questions you need to answer, as well as creating a sentence using some of your words. So you'll do that. On page 16, we see Darwin's voyage. Charles Darwin was a scientist that wanted to see why things were happening. A lot of scientists, they want to answer questions that they have. So you'll see that he got on a ship and he actually sailed around the world to observe animals. And you're going to read a little bit what he did in the Galapagos Islands. So you'll read that. And number 5, you will do number 5. So you'll do a little research outside and you'll report back to me what you find. On page 17, I see differences among species. What you're going to see in this section is that not all animals are the same, even within the same species. You'll see an example used for different beak sizes and why a finch has a particular type of beak based on where it lives. So you'll answer number 6 and then turn to page 18. On page 18, you see it says Darwin's homework, and you're going to read a little bit about chickens. And you're going to get into what's known as artificial selection. Artificial selection varies a little bit from natural selection because in artificial selection, you have humans deciding which genes get passed on. I've used the example in class that years ago there was actually a variation of a carrot that was purple and tasted exactly the same as a regular orange carrot, but the farmers realized that people were buying the orange carrots and not the purple ones, something with the tone of the color. So they started, when they would have to go and plant more carrot crops, they chose the orange carrots, and eventually the purple carrots were no more. So that is humans with artificial selection. Go ahead and read page 18, answer number 17, and it says list 3 other domestic animals that have many different breeds. So think about domestic means animals we have at home. Think about those different types of animals and answer that question. Okay, so on page 19, the very top says number 8. As you read, underline the names of other important thinkers who influenced Darwin's ideas. As you read page 19, there will be different names. You need to make sure you underline those, okay? And number 9 is a hard one. Number 9 tricks a lot of students. It says, explain why the size of your muscles is partly an acquired trait and partly dependent on DNA. So we acquire certain traits through habit or through work. So you need to discuss, after you read Organisms Acquired Traits, how muscles relate to both DNA and acquired traits. Okay, and then you read Earth changes over time, struggle for survival exists. Number 10, you're going to actually show the graph, and I want you to actually show me what can you conclude from the 2 red growth lines on the chart, and you actually answer that. So read page 19, pause the video, and complete the couple questions on that page and move on. Okay, page 20 is natural selection. Again, natural selection, the organisms themselves decide which traits get passed on. That's the biggest and the strongest survive. It's that kind of thinking. So you'll look at overproduction. You'll have a number 11 to answer. And then genetic variation. That is a very important skill that you'll need to know. So make sure you understand that variations and mutations are one and the same. And I want you to pay close attention when you read. So read those on page 20, pause the video, make sure you answer number 11, and move on to page 21. On page 21, we see selection. And you're going to see that selection and adaptation next, they are very important for traits being passed on. If an organism cannot adapt to its environment, say you're in the forest and it gets cold, well, you're either going to move away or you're going to, over time, adapt by growing new feathers. And those individuals that do that will get their genes passed on. Page 13, the very bottom, it says explain. In the table below, explain how each part of natural selection works. You have to tell me how it works, not the definition. I don't want the definition. I want to know how it works. How does overproduction work? In your own words, kind of define it in your own words. Also define genetic variation, selection, and adaptation. Just define those in your own words. Okay, we only have a few more pages left in this section. Go ahead, pause, make sure that you've been answering all the questions to this point, and we'll play on from there. Okay, so pause this tape, go back, make sure that you're doing what you're supposed to, and then we'll move on to page 22. Okay, on page 22, it says how species change over time. Over generations, adaptations become more common. So, over many generations, at one point humans only had 4 fingers on each hand. At one point, some of us started growing 5, and that became more common. And the animals that had the thumbs the genes would be passed on, and pretty soon, all of a sudden, it's common for us to have 10 fingers with the thumbs. So that's an example of an adaptation becoming more common. Number 15 says write a caption to describe how this butterfly's long mouth helps it survive. So you're going to have to read over generations, adaptations become more common, and answer that question. And number 14 says to underline examples of adaptations. Make sure you're underlining. Okay, I do grade each one of these. So pause that, answer those questions, answer that question, underline, and then move on to page 23. Okay. On page 23, we are looking at adaptations that can allow a species to survive and what happens when species become extinct. How a species can actually become extinct. There's been a couple big extinction periods in our time, and you're going to be reading those examples in your book. But make sure that you're reading it carefully because you have to visualize on number 16 and 17. Make sure you do that. Okay? And then you're on the visual summary. Okay, the visual summary. Guys, I know, the visual summary, all the answers for the visual summary are right here. They're literally underneath, and they're just upside down. You just have to look at those. So if you literally just have to look at the answer and write them down, I'm okay with that. Just don't leave them blank. But you do have to answer number 21. How does the environment influence natural selection? So to answer that, you just simply go back in that section with natural selection and look at the environment. And then what does it say about the environment with natural selection? I do want one full sentence. So a sentence is between 7 and 12 words, not just like 3 words. So make sure you have 7 to 12 words. And then finally, the lesson review. The lesson review is right here. You guys always do the lesson review. I need each of those answered in their full. Numbers 1, 2, and 3 are simple vocabulary words. Pick the right vocabulary word. Number 4 says summarize. Describe Darwin's observations on the Galapagos Islands during his voyage on the HMS Beagle. So it's asking you to describe his observations. So what did he see? Generalized, what did he see? Don't say animals because that would not be the correct answer. What is he observing with the animals? Scientifically, what's he doing? Number 5, how does environmental change affect the survival of a species? Well, go back to that section where it talked about survival of a species. And what does a species have to do if there's a big environmental change? So think about that. Go back in that section and look at that answer. Don't just guess on these. Number 6, why are only inherited traits, not acquired ones, involved in the process of natural selection? Well, that is in that section about inherited and acquired traits. So you need to go back in there and look for where it talks about natural selection, and it'll tell you why inherited traits are involved in the process of natural selection. Number 7, what is the relationship between mutation, natural selection, and adaptation? What that is asking is, how are all three related? Mutation, natural selection, and adaptation are all related to, and that's your answer. Number 8, how is each of these lizards adapted to its environment? So this is a visual, you're looking. How does each lizard match its environment? So it's a simple, you're looking and you're just writing down how they're good for their environment. And number 9, what might happen to a population of rabbits in a forest if a new predator moved into the forest? The natural answer is they'd all get eaten. But there's really at least 2 different answers. Yes, they could all get eaten, but what else could happen? If their environment changes, what can a species do to survive? So you need to look at least 2 different options. Don't just write down they could get eaten, because you would get that wrong. If you have any questions, go back in this video, go back in your book, or ask an adult. All right? Thank you.